on your pursuit of truth, your you know, spiritual path that you've been on, have you yet, which I imagine you have, but have you yet encountered like what they would call the dark night of the soul, or like a in learning a new truth about reality, some maybe panic or despair, or have you had any type of, I guess, existential crises over, something that you've learned through, psychedelics or, whatever methods that you use?
I would say early in my exploration of psilocybin, there were a lot of existential questions and things like that. I've had some dark night of the soul experiences while on psilocybin, like going through the psychedelic experience and actually having that hero's journey trajectory. But surprisingly, I haven't really had any true dark night of the soul type journey situations where outside of the medicine, I felt in some sort of existential despair. Generally, what the experience of destroying my paradigms has done for me has been it's been positive for the most part. It's been an ability to or an opportunity to put my psyche back together in a way that is, we'll say, more efficient, more informed than it was prior, and more comfortable within my own self. So I haven't had too many experiences of Dark Night of the Soul outside of actually in the experience itself. How about you?
I pretty much agree with like your experience. That's kind of what I've had. More like earlier on in my path, I think I've had some moments like that, especially, of course, I think most people will have that on a high dose of psychedelics. You'll go through um, some, paradigm shattering experiences and learn things about yourself and reality. But what made me think of that is in my study of like epistemology and just my contemplation exercises, there was a time where I wouldn't say I was um, convinced of solipsism, but I was contemplating solipsism, just thinking about it. Solipsism being that the only thing that exists is my finite mind, that basically everyone else is an NPC in a sense. Like it, um, because it's like with epistemology, I thought about basically, I mean, I kind of knew this already, but I really focused on the realization that there's no way I could ever know that anyone else was conscious in the sense of sentient. So it's when you contemplate that and think on it, it's like you can attach yourself. I can see how solipsism is like, I don't want to say an attractive idea, but an idea that people could latch onto because in a sense it's hard to disprove. I think there are experiences you can have where you will discover that it's not the truth, but I think that's from my experience mainly only from some type of intense psychedelic experience. But I don't know, have you ever contemplated solipsism, or what are your thoughts on solipsism?
Yeah, I think solipsism is one of the early lessons that I sort of learned. And I think it's a valuable one as well, but it never brought me to a place of negativity. But what I see now is I was green. You know what I mean? I was less experienced and I was more easily commandeered by an idea than I am now, more attached to my ideas. So when I did have something come up like a true solipsism, type mindset, um, I got lost in it a little bit, but not lost in a bad way. Like it didn't make me feel bad or anything like that. It didn't. I didn't have trouble contemplating it or integrating it into my life at the time. But what I've been learning now is that everything that we every label, every philosophy, every way of contemplating the infinite or the great mystery is just a framework and it's just a perspective from a mindset that maybe had an experience or had a few experiences that led you to think that way. But none of these things are finite. None of these things are actual, accurate ways of describing what the mystery is. And what I'm realizing now is that the more perspectives that you can come at something from, the more context you have to learn about it in a deep way. And I try not to marry myself to any of my ideas because I know that they're just my ideas. They're my experience. And I've been doing this Blue Morpho Academy course. And shouts out to the cohort and shouts out to Maestro Hamilton. One of the things that he teaches is that when a lot of people talk about, say, the psychedelic experience, when they talk about ayahuasca, when they talk about mushrooms, they'll say, mushrooms is this, the spirit of the mushroom is that, what you'll experience is this. And what he taught us to sort of frame things in is a perspective of, in my experience, it's this one time I felt it, it was like this. It showed itself, it presented itself like this. Because especially in the psychedelic realm, things are going to always be changing, growing, evolving. And after 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 experiences, you're never going to have the same perspective as you did at 20 experiences or whatever. It's always going to be changing, it's always going to be evolving. And it's important to not put any sort of definitive statements on your philosophy or how you look at things, whether it be through a religious lens or through, an epistemological lens.
Yeah, and I noticed, like, as far as putting like a label, like psychedelics are this or that, I've noticed, and at least, talking to people about their experience, like I've talked to quite a few people about, usually it's about mushrooms, more of the people I know more people that have done psilocybin. And it's really crazy because if I sit there and say, uh, a mushroom experience is X, but they tell me theirs and it's totally different than the things I experience. And I think it's such a personal journey to go through. It's like it's impossible to tell someone what they're going to experience on mushrooms. Just I think the one thing you can say pretty definitively is that psilocybin is powerful, and that's about it. And you can't go into much more detail because I've heard, such varying experiences and even like continuing varied experiences. Like one person, I'll talk to a single person who each time experiences uh, psilocybin differently than I do. So it's like I think it's totally dependent on the individual to see for themselves. Like I imagine before you ever did mushrooms, you did a lot of research and looked into it and prepared yourself, but nothing can truly prepare you for the experience, and no other person can tell you what it is.
Yeah, and that's why when somebody asks me what it feels like or what the experience is like, it's really hard to describe it to them. I try to use words that uh, I think they'll understand that can fit within their cultural context. And again, I always start it by saying, in my experience, this is how it felt, or this is how it was, or at this particular trip, in this particular moment in my spiritual path, this is what it was like. But what I like to say to people is like, I can't tell you what the experience is gonna be like because it can have such a wide range, um, of variety. But what I will say to you is that it has the potential to be one of the most powerful experiences of your life, and it's most likely going to be very powerful. What direction it goes in, that's up to you. If it's a situation where like I'm sitting for someone, then I can tell them, I'm here for you. If anything does go wrong, or if things, whatever direction it goes in, it's going to be okay because I'm going to be here to help ground you in this and that. And even if I'm taking the substance with the person, it's the same. I'm going to be here for you, here to ground you, here to help you through it. But yeah, I like to say it's just going to be powerful. I don't know in what direction it's going to go, but that's about it.
It's something that like you don't really think about in your standard state of consciousness is basically how limited language is, because it really works well for our standard survival needs and just, our normal living. And then it's like not till when you take psychedelics, at least for me, is like when I realized how limited language really is. It's like in a lot of my experiences, it's like I can't talk because it's like you can't, the language is so limited that you could never convey what's happening. I mean, it's just, it's something that, in one of my experiences that I like just watched language just fall apart and turn into nothing. And it's just, it's so strange that you can have these experiences. Something as simple as that can really change things in your life or give you an insight that you couldn't have really truly gotten any other way. You could have maybe had the insight, but not in a such an impactful and like true way.
Yeah, that's the interesting thing about psychedelics is that there are different ways to learn. You sit in front of a teacher and they tell you words and they give you a book to read or something. You take notes and you have this teaching. You've been taught something. You've been given knowledge by, some sort of superior authority figure. But with psychedelics, they teach you through experience. It's a different kind of learning. Through the Blue Morpho Academy, we had a live Zoom ceremony where um, our master shaman instructor, Maestro Hamilton Souther, he was conducting an ayahuasca ceremony in Peru at the same time as he was conducting like the ceremony for us. Like we shared through Zoom the experience of having an ayahuasca ceremony, and people took their own substances. I happened to take mushrooms, and it was a wonderful learning experience. And near the end of the peak, that's the reason I bring it up is because I really resonate with that teaching aspect of it through experience because I just felt the mushroom teaching me things that weren't language based and that weren't earthly. They weren't something that I could put into words, but I just kept thinking to myself, God, these things are just the most amazing, magical, wonderful teachers. But if somebody would have asked me, well, what did you learn? I can't really say, I can't tell you in a few sentences. It's an experiential type of learning.
Yeah, it's like rearranging of your DNA or something. It's there. The teaching is there and it has a true effect, but it's not something that you can convey or give anyone else. That's the thing. Like, eh, you see this in regular life too. It's like when you tell someone something, if you can't convince anyone of anything. That's how I'm convinced of that. If someone has an opposing view or doesn't quite uh, want to know what you're saying or understand it, or they just are stuck to their belief, you can't teach anyone anything. But if they come to that same, like the your conclusion based on their own research or something, if they come up with it on their own, then they will adopt it and truly believe it. And then they'll defend that one, basically that belief. But yeah, it's like having experience is the best teacher for sure.
Yeah, man, you run into trouble when, again, you marry yourself to your ideas. And we all do that to an extent. If somebody walked into this room right now and they told me that, psilocybin mushrooms were actually cultivated on the earth by the devil and, they're here to sway you away from true spirituality, I would feel offended by that and I would feel the need to defend my position. But again, it's being married to a position. So even though it comes from a good place, and I believe it comes from a place of experience, and it comes from a place of love and knowledge, it's still an idea, and I'm still married to it. Which is again is what I go back to. I like to say, in my experience, this is how it felt. This is how it seemed. This is how it was. Not this is how it is. This is what God is. This is what religion is. Even though, if you press me enough, I do have opinions on those things.
And I can like relate with that a lot because I enjoy like debating and going back and forth and you know figuring out whose idea can shine or win. I enjoy that. And so it's hard for me. And I've gotten better at this, but it's hard for me to not defend an opinion. And one of the things that I've done and like kind of a mode I try to put myself in is to like view perspectives as things to collect, not correct. So I'll try to just collect as many perspectives as I can while also sharing maybe my beliefs, but not in a way where I want to see whose is better or if I can prove to be right in some type of way. Just collect as many perspectives as possible because it's hard to say this, but I think it is inherently true that each perspective is is very valuable. no matter how wrong it may seem to you, or if it's like the polar opposite, it's still very valuable. And there are people that live that as true as you live yours. So it's like there's something valuable to me that I think of trying to, as I say, collect the experiences or the perspectives.
Yeah, I mean, other perspectives just broaden the context in which you can understand your own. And it gives your perspective life. It actually contextualizes your experience to begin with.
And, with a lot of things that I personally find like very important, like a lot of the ideas we talk about on on this podcast, I found that it is pretty difficult to convey them to someone who is on a totally different wavelength, let alone convince them, not even convince them, just kind of have them understand it in a certain way. And I think, there are some people who will, you tell them about consciousness and the way reality is, and the kind of, speaking of idealism and, spirituality. And if somebody isn't, some people are so, against that way of thinking, that's where I think psychedelics are beautiful, because I might not be able to convince you, but the experience of a psychedelic will teach you at the very least. It's not going to give you answers if you're not looking, but it will show you that things are not as they appear to be, and it will open you up to different ways of thinking.
Yeah, it's funny you say that because last weekend, I think it was about last, no, weekend before last, I was up here actually. And I was talking to someone here, and we were discussing a particular person that we know that was sort of going down like a path that we didn't necessarily think was best for them. And I had voiced my concern for that person and for their feelings and what they've been through and sort of what brought them to the position to make the decisions that they're making. And the person I was talking to said, "Pff, you're too soft." And I was like, no, it's not about being soft. It's about having compassion and cultivating compassion for yourself and everybody else in your life. And some people just can't hear that. They don't have that perspective. They haven't had the experience of maybe being broken down to, to a point where you have to learn compassion or you can't make it through whatever's going on in your life.
And that comes with the understanding of like the oneness of reality. It's like as I mentioned in the early goings of the podcast, something that, not, I don't want to say something that disturbed you or dark night of the soul, something that just you had to contend with, is that when you have that realization and understanding of the oneness of that, what you are is me. The whole thing, that it's not like, oh no, you're just kind of like me. It's like, no, that is you. You're looking at yourself, and your true self, not your ego self. It's like, then you have to really deal with becoming more compassionate and empathetic. Like, it just has to happen. It's like, because you can feel, and what they're going through is, it's you going through it. So it allows you to become more empathetical with people. But it's also kind of hard, because when you see horrible things happening around the world, and it's not as easy to just brush it off. When you see people going through tough experiences, it's like you can often take on those feelings, and that can be difficult sometimes. And I don't let that happen to me too much, but it will happen sometimes.
Yeah, I think the benefit that I had was when I was a kid, when I was younger, I always inhabited this sort of mode of compassion, and it didn't fit into the schooling society that I was in. It didn't fit into the working society that I was in after I left school. Every paradigm that I found myself in felt I felt this unnatural form of contentment around me that just didn't work. And then when I took psychedelics, it expanded my ability to appreciate and understand compassion itself. And it felt like I was finally waking up into myself because I was able to just sort of disregard all of the negativity, all of the dark energies that were cultivating around me. And it felt natural. It felt like I was coming into my own, and like I was coming home. Like I could finally be okay within myself, standing in this position of compassion. So I think maybe I got lucky in that way to where I didn't have to contend with any sort of motive thought that I was stuck in that was opposite of compassion. That's why, like, I love Buddhism so much and I love Hinduism because there's a lot of sects of Hinduism, like Bhakti, where it's like all about love and compassion in the heart. And these are the things that resonate with me. And, psychedelics helped me to realize that there are versions of this, there are philosophies of this that are widespread that you can find, study, and learn from.
Yeah, like, as far as, like, the empathy thing, it's like it can be this is I'll tell you the scale in which I'm talking about, what how I was saying. Basically, I found myself feeling stupid at times because, like, even with somebody that you're, like, having an argument with, it's hard to have an argument with them when you remind yourself of what's really happening. You're just yelling at a mirror. You're arguing with a mirror, basically. I mean, it and on many different levels. Because first off, what you're looking at is just your projection of the person, and then turns out that projection of the person is a reflection of you, and that is you on many different levels. So, like, I find myself I don't argue with people as much anymore because it's silly in a way. Um, but then it goes from that to on a large scale of like understanding that like war that's happening. And it's like instead of I wouldn't say it's a negative thing, I'd say it's a positive thing. Instead of brushing it off and being like that has nothing to do with me. I have to actually recognize that it does affect me in on my deeper self like it is because it's me going through those things even not just because my perceptions aren't showing me that doesn't mean that it's not happening. Um, and just I wanted to touch on how you just ended what you were saying there. It's like all that you just described. It just shows why psychedelics are so important for mental health. It's like so many people have to. I know they do. They say we have a mental health crisis. Feel like how you just described. Like they just don't fit into this uh, paradigm or the culture that we were indoctrinated into and told is truth. It's like so they're battling like for truth in their soul, and it's like if a psychedelic can relieve that, I think that's something amazing that we have to really educate people about. And the thing is, it's like I think a big reason why people are feeling that way, especially is there's no spirituality in our culture. There's no true connection to the divine, like in a real way where you live your everyday life through the divine. You have a real connection with it, and then you experience life as such. That just doesn't exist in Western culture. Um, I'm sure there are, groups of religious people, some that kind of feel that, and but we're more secular than ever right now, and people that we have the meaning crisis. People don't have any purpose, and I think delving into spirituality and really delving into it, not just saying I'm a spiritual person, but really giving it a try and then seeing where that takes you. And I think like you're a perfect example. And the same for me. I think it's changed my life in a way that I quite literally could have never imagined. I couldn't have imagined the paradigm that I'm living in now, like the way that that reality is to me is night and day compared to what it was. It's like a basically a death and a rebirth.
It's magic. It is true, pure magic. There's no other word for it. I've never seen anything that is remotely close to having the power and the ability for change and healing as psychedelics. I mean, maybe I'm biased, maybe I haven't tried enough things, but man, this seems like a streamlined route directly to the source of the healing energies of the universe that allow you to just heal. I mean, and it's not even like you have to go in there and re-experience your traumas or something. You're not going to a psychologist and talking about experiences in your past that destroyed you or something and that bring back those traumas. Like, you're being healed of your traumas without re-experiencing them, and that to me is such a gift.
And it seems like with psychedelics that there is some like super intelligence to it where it's like it's orchestrated. A lot of times my trips feel like they are orchestrated like by God. That's the only way I could put it. It's like um it's just after it's done and I look back, it's like it couldn't have been more perfect. It was absolute perfection, like the way you will be taken through possible trials and tribulations and shown something, then brought somewhere. And like, you just go all these places and it all is straight perfection. And, you know, before I was, practicing any of this and I was still atheist, um, I remember feeling like basically that there was no mystery, no magic, that, it's even hard to say now because, like, I thought that we had it all figured out, like, that we've, colored in all the spaces on the map. I thought that, there was no mystery or no magic, and now it's like everything I look at has is magical. Like, it's like the reality itself, life itself is pure fucking magic. Like, there's nothing it it's indescribable. I wish, if I would have been this me talking to the old me, I would be looking at myself like I were crazy. I'd be like, "What happened to you?" you know, because in that point of my life, I was also so sure of all my perspectives and my ideas. I was married to them. Like, my identity was my opinions basically. I was what I believed. I just I could see how people it's so easy for us to fall into like these identity politics, all this stuff. I think it's such an effective weapon to, divide people because it's in our nature. If we have no divinity, and we're not chasing or working through some form of spirituality, we attach on to something else. I mean, it's in a human being's nature to worship. And if you don't worship the divine, you're going to worship the mundane. And it's not a good way to live. I mean, it's always going to come up short.
Yeah, this is the idea that, like, if you believe in, or if you live your life as if you believe in Christ, it's going to lead to a better outcome. You know, it's funny. These are all tools, religion, psychedelics, these things, they're all tools to live a better life. And instead of looking at these tools as descriptions of reality and descriptions of things that we can't even really understand and hold, I think it would be a great advantage to us if we looked at these things as what they were, as tools, as technology, as ways of navigating.
Yeah, I like that. I think it's definitely an interesting way to look at like psychedelics specifically as technology. I mean, it's so much more than that, but it's like that is what it is in a sense. It's like spirit tech. It's some type of otherworldly technology, and it can do things that are, it's before the experience. There's no way you could have possibly comprehended the reality of what you are capable of experiencing. And you just mentioned too, that just made me think of this, like, um, belief and, if you believe in Christ, just, act like Christ, that type of thing between belief and action. And I often wonder sometimes, like, if someone says that they believe in Christ and they know the teachings, but they don't act like Christ at all, I sometimes I feel like that person might not really believe. It's like I think it's easy to say you believe in things, but if you live your everyday life like they don't exist, I don't think you actually believe them. Um, it's like that's I think the best example it made me think of is like even with like UFOs, aliens. Like you ask a lot of people that think that maybe aliens or that aliens exist, and it's like, yo, you really believe that? They're like, yeah, but they don't behave like they do because if they really knew it, there would be a massive change in behavior. I think. So it's interesting. It just made me think of that, like the interaction between belief and action. It's I think the true way to see what someone believes is basically just how they act.
And their practice.
Yes.
You know, I just spoke to Lama Surya Das recently, and this is a guy who has practice, man. He has training from some of the greatest lamas to ever live. The Dalai Lama himself calls him, you know, the American Lama. This dude really has a breadth of knowledge and experience. Same with like Ram Dass. Anybody who has gone down the path and has taken it seriously and has done the practices, whether it be through psychedelics or spirituality, you can really tell in that person, you know, because there's like there's a humility, there's a particular sense of humor that people have that have been to these places that um is attractive.
Yeah.
It's refreshing.
Yeah, they like exude peace.
Hmm.
It's just like a very peaceful aura, just content, void of lack. That's the thing. As human beings, we're always feeling that we are in lack. We lack something. We need something. But those people are the types that they realize, the people that you just mentioned, they're not in lack, that they have everything they need. They understand that to like a very high level. And you mentioned people like Ram Dass, all these like spiritual masters in a sense. It's like the very awesome thing about this practice, that what we're talking about here, is that that type of thing is available to everyone by your very nature. It is available to you. You have all the tools needed to become that type of person, get into that state of mind and understand things in a different way where you don't have to be feeling like you're in lack constantly, and you don't have to be just always upset about something that's going to happen, or upset about something that did happen. You know, it's the accessibility is amazing. You don't have to have money. You don't have to. It's just there for everybody.
Yeah, I mean, if I want to be a professional baseball player, I can't. I literally cannot do it. I don't have the gifts. I didn't have, you know, the training, all that stuff. But at any time in your life, at any time, any person can start this path and can achieve a degree of what we call enlightenment. I don't like using that word, but I've I'm coming around to it a little more, you know, as I read certain texts and as I listen to certain people describe um, you know, what it is or what it can be. I still don't believe that you can just like become enlightened and then you're like this spiritual fucking, you know, god that's floating on air all the time. You know what I mean? But there are, I think, degrees of awakening.
Sure. Yeah.
That's what I would more prefer to call it instead of enlightenment, because enlightenment sort of implies an end goal, and there is no end to this. We're going to be doing this forever until the second I transition from this plane to the next. I want to be learning and I want to be evolving.
See, you bring up enlightenment, and like I agree, the word seems to have like so much baggage. It's like people hear it and they get all sorts of ideas in their head. I mean, it's really just a word, first off. So, but I like Rupert Spira. He's like a non-dual teacher, and I like the way he talks about enlightenment. He just downplays it like crazy because in it he's kind of right. I mean, he is right, but the way he puts it basically is like enlightenment. First off, he said what you said. I don't even like to use the word, which I understand. Like everybody expects that enlightenment is going to be this like massive experience with, lights and colors. It's going to be just this crazy thing. And the way he puts it is like, no, enlightenment doesn't have to be that at all. He basically says it's just when you recognize what you are, like recognize what is actually going on, recognize your true nature. And it doesn't have to be deep in the DMT realm with the machine elves. You could just be sitting there. I mean, Rupert Spira is a perfect example of somebody who didn't use the psychedelic path. He used what he called the direct path. And he is one of the wisest people that I love to listen to. And he's like, it's awesome to hear somebody like him say the things he says, knowing that he never touched the psychedelic, which is like all these things that he teaches are pretty much teachings of the psychedelic as well. I mean, and that's why I think there's so many methods to get there, because no matter what, truth remains truth.
Yeah, there are so many methods to get there. And there are so many different types of things that you can learn from psychedelics because there are so many different types of frequencies and energies that are in there. You know, there's the healing energies, there's, you know, the wisdom energies, the intelligence energies, the energies of the heart that
The
can teach you.
love,
Yeah.
yeah.
I mean, there are so many things that they can teach you, but then there's also the tricksters and there's, the imposter energies. Like, there's so much wild shit in the psilocybin realm, especially. And man, there's just so many paths you can take to learn from it, which is why I adore it, man.
Yeah, and that's why it's, like, impossible to tell someone what their experience will be like because it varies so much. Like you said, all those different things all can happen. I mean, there's so many different avenues that it can go, and that's one of the reasons why it, for me, doesn't really get easier to do. It's, like, right before it, because there's still, you've done this before, it's powerful, that you've had amazing breakthrough experiences, but you've also had hard experiences, challenging ones. So it's like even though you've taken it, it's you could go in many different avenues, different ways. You don't know what it'll be. So it's like every time you still have to pay the price. It's not like easy where it's just like, oh, I'm an expert now. Let me just do this. Because the moment you do that, you're gonna get slapped down. The possibilities are endless.
And your intention is so, so important. It changes everything. Like, my intentions are slightly different than they used to be, going through this academy and everything. My intentions have become to sort of communicate with the spirits of the mushrooms and to basically like befriend them so that they're my allies, so that I can learn how to transmute their energy and help other people during experiences. That's like the basis of sitting and facilitating for people is, being able to use and harness and guide the direction of the spirit of the molecule to, to heal people essentially. That's why I said, there's healing energies, there's intelligence energies, there's wisdom, and depending on where you want to go, what your intention is for the experience, you can have the intention to just open your heart, and it'll help you to open your heart. But that might be a very different experience than if you go in with an intention to acquire wisdom or knowledge, or help someone, or heal trauma. There are just so many different utilities that these substances provide, which is why they are the ultimate consciousness technology.
And like all of those different experiences are going to be vastly different for each person too, which is also fascinating because what I've realized is like, I mean, it's pretty obvious, but it's the knowledge that you bring in to the experience, and also your past experience that you bring into the experience just affects the experience completely. That's why the work that you do outside of the experience is important. You do the work outside the experience, then you come into the experience with more knowledge, more understanding, and you can be propelled even further. Rather than, that's why there's such a vast difference between basically what we're talking about here. And then I would say the vast majority of people who take psilocybin or LSD, whatever, you hear them like the concert goers, the ones that they take it, and even like sometimes a decent dose. It's usually a lower dose than we're talking about when people do this, but they'll take a decent dose, and they're not in the position to get the type of experience we're talking about because it's not on their radar. I found like for you, I could tell obviously it was, and like for me, because I have experience with both. The first time I did psychedelics, it was more in the kind of just see what happens. It was still great and amazing, but the potentials of psychedelics weren't even on my radar yet. And my curiosity was there, but it wasn't as deep. It didn't have the depth that it had after, doing more work and understanding more things about myself. And so after I see the vast difference between what a psychedelic experience can be on either end, and it's night and day.
And also, integration is very, very important. People that have big, profound experiences and then don't properly integrate them into their life have a harder time sort of adjusting to the new framework that they've been given or given access to. And I find that for me, integration is based in how big a role is this new perspective going to have in your life? How large a part of your heart has been filled by this? And how much are you going to dedicate yourself to walking this path? Like, this podcast is integration. Look what we're doing here,
Mhm.
dude.
And sometimes, like, yeah, like I when you said where, you know, the Matrix thing, it's like, oh, like, it could be scary, because like, to realize in a sense that you are all alone, in a sense, you are totally alone, and that can be scary for people, and I noticed this, I was thinking about it, and you look at the word "alone," and it's all one, like, it's spelled all
Oh,
one, and that
yes.
doesn't seem as scary that way. When you're alone, you are all one, and it's like a that's like a beautiful thing. It's not a scary thing. And especially like, you know, it allows you to have deeper connections, I think, too. Like, really appreciate people and appreciate the moment. Sometimes I find myself now in like a very like just average situation, and then I realize like this is the best moment ever. Like, it's just it's perfect. It's perfect. Now the hard thing, and this is where like it really comes into play, is like in moments of suffering, can you do that? And it's not easy. It's a tall order. And I think people like, you know, Ram Dass, Rupert Spira, these people that you consider enlightened or ascended masters, like, they can hold that energy and that peace in deep suffering. And, you know, it's such a powerful thing. And it's powerful for everyone around them. Like, just to witness that shows you that it's possible. And, you know, it's I luckily, I haven't had anything of late be too major in suffering, but, you know, everybody suffers. It to varying degrees at different points in their experience, and, I found that I can remind myself during suffering, like, in experience suffering, I can remind myself of what the truth is, what I am, and then it helps, but in certain circumstances, it is a tall order.
Yeah, I've been lucky like you. Psychologically, I haven't really had, too many traumatic suffering type experiences as of late, but unluckily, I do have Crohn's disease, so in great moments of physical pain, I find myself trying to achieve this and trying to do this. And again, I keep bringing up the Blue Morpho Academy, but it's a big part of my life right now, and it's really teaching me so much. The basis of this is what our instructor calls sanctuary. You invoke sanctuary, and there are three tenets. I won't get too far into it, but essentially, it's a code for your consciousness to ground yourself, heal, harmonize, reorient. Um, and it's a really beautiful thing. It's a great technology. And uh, part of the reason why we hadn't recorded in a while is because we were both super sick. And during my illness, I had just this insane headache that lasted like 3 days long. It was one of the worst migraines I've ever had. And during this migraine, I'm trying to invoke sanctuary and I'm trying to ground myself and I'm trying to sort of, work my way through it in just the way that you were describing. And it, it works, but it's not magic.
Right.
It doesn't take away the pain. What it does is it creates a safe place to heal and reorient. And that I think is the most valuable part of it.
It can it can make you at peace with not being at peace,
Yeah.
you know, in a way. Um, it's yeah, it's also like it's just easier for me to appreciate the little things. It's like, because yeah, we were both sick, and you know, I felt horrible, and I thought of this quote. I don't know the exact quote, but you'll get the gist. And it's like, a healthy man wants a million things. He wants $1 million. He wants, you know, everything. And a sick man just wants to be healthy. And it's like, you know, I'm sitting there sick and I'm like, all I want is to not be sick. So it's like, when I get better, remember that. You know, I have everything I need. I don't need to walk around living in lack and being like, I need more of this. I need more of that. No, remember how you felt when you were sick? You have everything you ever wanted from that moment to now. You just wanted to not be sick. You wanted health. That's it. And yeah, it just opens your eyes to things like that.
Dude, I think about that every time I'm sick, and I thought about that so much this last past illness. And it's funny you bring it up. When we were little kids, we were little when our mom would ask us a question. She used to say to us, "Would you rather be sick and rich, have everything in the world, or poor and healthy. And as dumb kids, I don't know about you, but I always say, you know what? If I'm sick, I can deal with the sickness, and I'll just take the wealth. And she used to like gently show us and describe to us why we were wrong about that. And I totally get it now. I'm with her 100% there. I'd much rather be healthy and poor.
Yeah, that's just it's crazy thinking about that. Yeah, she used to do that all the time. It was like quite often,
It was.
and I remember when you say it, like I don't even have to think because it's conditioned. It's like when the way it felt is like when a teacher calls on you in class, you gotta like give the answer. So like I would give the right answer because I knew what the right answer was for her. But then you realize it's like it's absolutely true. If you are sick, it's just nothing else matters. I mean, and for me, I think that just says a lot about how we experience life all the time. We're just like totally deluded in so many ways, being like in the ego self. Like it's really sometimes it's difficult too to live that way because I'm not perfect. I am totally still in my ego self a lot, but I know the truth and I try to practice through it. So it's like sometimes it's difficult, because you catch yourself, which is a good thing because at least I catch myself. But it's like after living in this type of world and being conditioned the way we are, it's like it takes work to move through that. And that's why a lot of times I think, and the way I started, a big part of it, which I think is really important, I would advise people to do is like a long period of deprogramming. And that's why I talk about epistemology a lot. I think that helped me a lot to kind of understand what I really knew and what I was just believing and holding on to and identifying with. So, and a lot of with spirituality, it's not about like a lot of it isn't about gaining, it's about getting rid of. Like you don't need to get a bunch more information. I mean, there are aspects that, it's you want to learn lessons and all that, but a lot of it is getting rid of what you held on to before and what you believed. Like the deprogramming aspect was really important for me, and going through it made me realize like all this shit I believe has no real basis in anything. It's just pure indoctrination, and because the other people around me have the same indoctrination, it seems to be true. But there's no basis in truth about like all this stuff. And you start to get rid of it and then you have a blank slate to say, just take a breath and let's see what's true, you know?
Yeah, and then you realize that the things that are most worthy of adding are relationships. Relationships to yourself, relationships to spirit, relationships to the energies of life, relationships to other people. Those are the things that are important to add, and experiences, adding experiences. You know, I think it's one of the lessons that very first lessons I got from psilocybin was travel. Get your ass out of this tiny little town you're in and go see some shit, because there is just so much to experience around the world. I mean, I haven't traveled even close to the amount that I want to, but there's so much to experience. And that's, I think, where a lot of the most important lessons come. I think it was Terrence McKenna who said, um, if you want to learn, sit in front of a mountain or a waterfall. Like stare at something like that. That'll teach you some shit. Sit in front of a tree, sit under a tree, meditate. The Buddha became enlightened under the Bodhi tree. Nature is a teacher, experience is the real teacher.
Yeah. Yeah, tree is a good one too. I think a tree is a good one. Um, we should go to Serpent Mound.
I'd love to.
Yeah, I mean it's close, so we could try to do that. But yeah, there's no. That's what I was saying before. It's like experience is the only way to truly convince yourself of something. I mean, in a deep way where it really affects you, because somebody can tell you something over and over again, and it just doesn't latch on. And that's with psychedelics. It grips you up and it shows you. It's so amazing. I mean, think about the capability of our mind, even the finite mind. Even it's illusory, but just what you can do with your mind is it's like all this stuff that I never thought was possible. And even though like now, we're gaining an understanding of, like you said, with the psychedelics, with healing, not just like trauma, but physically healing things that people can do with their minds, and it's something that we all know, but we don't um apply or frame it in the proper way because we just call that the placebo effect. And it's weird because it's thought of and framed as like this weird thing that is happens by accident, or it's just like a way to test a pill. Like it's like, but when you think about it, it's like that is pure magic. It's amazing that your mind can heal you, and it makes sense because your mind is all there is, there's no separate matter at all. So the mind is just it's capable of so many interesting things that I never would have thought to be possible. It's just like now the possibilities are endless, whereas before it was no mystery, no adventure, just nihilism, meaninglessness. Now you can see meaning in everything. Everything has inherent meaning. And it's just it feels good to have left the place of nihilism, because nihilism is it's destroying lives every moment of every day.
Nihilism is a very prominent milestone on the path. When you start, at least in my journey, when I started the journey of trying to achieve true knowledge, or just trying to find my way through, in a genuine way, nihilism was like the very first milestone. It was the very first signpost, and I really liked it. It felt really good to just hate on everything. It supported my atheism. I mean, and I was like, yeah, this is for me. I was so nihilistic, but I had to shed myself of that, and some people aren't able to. I was talking to somebody recently who really exemplifies what you were describing earlier and just sort of right now, which is like he was telling me he feels like there's nothing left to discover. There's no place for him to exude his curiosity. And he felt as if there's nothing left to figure out. And I was like, oh man, you got to find a different technology, find a new tool, and find a new way, because that nihilistic part often stems from the inability to find a new path of learning. And that's exactly what happened to him. Is he's finding himself in a very nihilistic form, and he's not happy about it. But at least there's that. If you find that you're not really comfortable, and you're not happy about your nihilism, it's a sign that you're ready to sort of move past it. You just got to find the right path.
Yeah, that's like the worst, to be in that state. It's just it's dark. But it seems to me that like the way our society is right now, it seems like it's bred for nihilism. And even like in our pop culture, it kind of presents nihilism as cool, like you're too cool for school almost, like you don't care, you're dark, it's like kind of presented in a certain way where really it's just total shit. And it's horrible for you. It's horrible for your health and mind. And like today, especially, it's like we have cell phones, and when you're in the materialist state of mind and you're believing in just like the way that you were taught the world is, and now you have a device in your hand that can answer. I mean, from this is from the perspective of a materialist. I have this device in my hand that can answer every question. Everything is right here. I know it all. It's on the phone. That's what it says. Google says that. That's the truth. If you have any question, instead of investigating or pondering, it's like, no, this is the answer. Put the phone down. Over. No need to think, no need to explore, nothing. And I think that is like it just feeds nihilism in a deep way. Ugh, not good. Um, and you mentioned how just acknowledging your nihilism is like one of the first steps, I think, in going in the right direction. I think another step, which for a lot of people is small and maybe not even you don't even think too much about it, is the step from atheist to agnostic. And I think, like, I don't want to speak for you, but I would imagine that. Now, you never mind. I was gonna say you probably went atheist to agnostic right after your first mushroom trip. but you were probably already agnostic by that point, I would imagine, just because you had the curiosity to even investigate.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, like a lot of people, when you're like deep in your nihilism, you are atheist. When you are deep in, that type of mindset, you're like, there's definitely no God. I know it. It's if you believe in God, that's stupid. But then when you make at least one step where you're just like, it's one tiny step out of nihilism towards truth, where you're like, I don't know, maybe there's something. It's like the universe, like you create some type of physical representation for what you think God could possibly be. And then hopefully to later find out it was nothing like you thought it was and you could just never have imagined. But that step I think is an important one, and one that I've recognized in myself. When I found myself becoming agnostic, I became less nihilistic. Like they coincided a bit.
Yeah, for me, it was a book. I think, if I'm remembering correctly, what brought me out of my atheism and toward agnosticism was a book called Biocentrism by a guy named Dr. Robert Lanza, who I'd love to talk to. It's essentially a scientific paradigm that has consciousness as being fundamental. And when I read that book, it opened my mind to consciousness itself being that thing that stood in the place of God or the universe, whatever it was. I was like, consciousness being a fundamental force of the universe and being sort of the projection at which everything is created. And it was a very interesting, mind opening experience for me to read that book, and it really led me toward, Alan Watts and Terrence McKenna and like all of these people who um get you into psychedelics and spirituality. Of course, like the gatekeepers nowadays in our society, everybody's listening to Alan Watts and Ram Dass and Terrence McKenna. Those are the three amigos, I feel like.
It's funny how like before even get like how naive and silly like my idea of what God was. It's like now I even give religious people like I actually love religion now. And I give religious people more respect than I used to. Um but the idea like when people think of God, they think that like for some reason religion has a monopoly on God, and what God is only the image of what a specific religion says. And that's not the case at all. I think each religion is just pointing to God, trying to point at the one same thing, the one consciousness. So it's like, but before you have that realization, it's like you think that you can't believe in God because God is owned by religion and you're not religious. So I think it's it's false to kind of hold that belief, but I feel like that's a lot of atheists. At least me, that's the way I looked at it. It's like if I'm not a Christian, then I don't believe in God, and if you're not a Christian, you don't believe in God, or Muslim, whatever. But I would always think that God is owned by religion when it's like that's so absurd. At the very best, religion is just pointing a tiny itty bitty figure in the finger in the direction of God.
And that's also a massive disservice of growing up in any society that is based in a religion. Like our society is based in a Judeo Christian form of thought. And when you're brought up in that, it defines God as the Christian version of God, and all other versions are wrong. And again, Christianity would have a monopoly on God in our society. And depending on where you go outside of the United States, maybe Allah has, the monopoly on spirituality, but that's the Western sort of materialist way.
And even with that, even the Christian representation of God is totally misrepresented. It's totally anthropomorphized, and it's just totally wrong compared to when you have a real spiritual understanding and then really look into what these like religious texts are actually depicting. And just because stories were the technology of the time and a way to communicate certain ideas to people doesn't mean that that's like it doesn't mean that what's in the book is literal, that God is in the sky and he's speaking words to people. Like I like to look at, you know, same as we were saying with psychedelics, like spiritual texts, ancient texts are a form of technology. And, now we make science books, and that's how we our authority is science at this point in our culture. But, when your average person couldn't understand that and you wanted to convey a powerful message, that's why, stories last millennia. Like, we have ancient myths and stories with that have lasted longer than, probably a lot of technology. If you imagine that if it's possible that there was an ancient culture in the past that had some form of technology, their story lasted longer than the tech. You know what I mean? If that makes sense. So a story is a technology that lasts a long time. And that's, I think, with, these religions, they're just stories that are trying to point to the divine. And, the only technology they had at the time was storytelling, which can be a very powerful technology.
Yeah, and now we have, advancements on that, books, internet, all the things that we value that are tech based in our society are versions of telling stories.
And, basically what I was, getting at is, let's say a meteor hits in, tomorrow or whatever and destroys half the earth, and, all of our tech doesn't work, everything is destroyed. The earth just overgrows all of our infrastructure, and the last surviving thing will be the story. Not, they say, because even like ancient Egypt, those things, however long they may be, they lasted a lot of weathering and much longer than our architecture and infrastructure would last. They say like our buildings would be completely gone in like 500 years. I think they say basically there's a few things that would last like the test of time, and one of them is Mount Rushmore. So, maybe way after we're long, we're blasted away and a new group of human beings come to the planet and rise. They're going to see Mount Rushmore, just some dudes' faces.
Yeah, it's funny, man. Like our buildings, all this stuff that we create, it's all made with insurance policies in mind. And
It's
if
cheap.
you take out an insurance policy on the pyramids of Giza, and you're never going to be able to collect off that.
Yeah, and our architecture is cheap and it's pathetic. It's like dead inside. It's not. See, the thing with like, a lot of these ancient megaliths and all these weird structures that we find. See, we still don't understand them. We don't know how long they are, and it seems like they are beautiful. A lot of them are temples where they're thought to be places of worship, and people are speculating now that the way they are made doesn't make any sense to us regarding the materials. They are made with specific materials in certain amounts in certain places, and basically it just doesn't make sense to us. We don't know what they were doing or why they would do it that way. And a lot of it isn't for aesthetic reasons. Like there's this really I don't know the exact specifics, but this one temple has like a very there's a very rare material, stone, that it was hard to get, this is what they say, in the time, and it was possibly, valued because, 1, it's hard to get, and it looked really nice. It was like some I forget what it was. But anyway, they would find this under the temples. So it would be like wasting the stone, like, because it's not the only purpose that we could see for it is that it looks good. But they would put it into their structures, like underneath and where it's out of sight. Weird, like, aspects to these structures that show that they have a function because they're also insanely precise, and function breeds precision. You don't need to be precise if there's no function. It's not all aesthetic. If you're going to have exact function or exact precision, it's usually to perform a function. That's how we, basically develop precision because we need it. Like if we build a cannon and it's imprecise and we're going to shoot it and it doesn't fire in the right direction, it's like, oh, well, if we make this exactly precise, it will fire exactly where we aim it. And that goes for basically all sorts of technologies. You got to make it precise in the exact measurements for it to function properly. So I would speculate that some of these, temples, whatever, megaliths might have some form of function. And, my just speculation would be that it could have something to do with altering human consciousness.
Because we don't take into consideration, any type of woo woo stuff, we consider it, when it comes to technology. We look at it, we look at the pyramids. What we're doing is we're going to analyze the pyramids based off of a pattern of engineering, because that's how we build all of our shit is engineering. And if we don't see a direct pattern that we can make up or relate to our style of engineering, we think that it's a tomb or it's just something dumb.
It's
But
absurd.
it is absurd.
There is one theory that I'm pretty sure the Great Pyramids, one of them, I forget. Well, I've heard a theory that they were like healing machines, like basically like a hospital in a sense. Like you go there and it would heal your body, and if you're in there long enough and whatever. And supposedly in the recent past, last 100 years, whatever, 50 years probably, they took someone to the pyramid and they did whatever they had to do and it healed them. Like it passed the test that they actually healed a person physically with this pyramid. And then they shut that shit down immediately. The Egyptologists who run basically what's allowed to happen in Egypt, they shut it down, never allowed to be investigated again. But it is speculated that it could heal people, and there have been incidents where it did heal someone. So
I've heard speculation that they're energy generators. I mean, there are so many different things, but the mystery of that shape in general, the shape of the pyramid is, I think, very important to a past and a history that we have unfortunately forgotten.
see, the thing that I'm fascinated with these ancient cultures is that they seem to be very brilliant and super fascinated with cosmology, with like the stars and our place in the universe. They were doing something far different than what we do, something that we don't understand because there's like artifacts that are super ancient that was mapping the universe, mapping the stars in very accurate ways. And it makes me think what exactly they were trying to do. And it's hard to imagine because what humanity is today, it's so far removed from that type of thinking. Um, Interestingly enough, materialism is relatively new. It's like relatively new form of metaphysics, thinking that, matter, space time is fundamental. Um, so if you give a group of human beings working from an idealist metaphysics time to build technology and work around their motives with that frame, I don't know. It's hard to wrap your head around what could be possible with a massive amount of human beings working through that motivation, that headspace.
And it seems like everything we see from the old times, from ancient times, whether it be the pyramids or whether it be Göbekli Tepe, it seems that what these things were made for is to communicate a message, or at least a very important part of their structure is communicating a message. It almost feels as if they're trying to get us to pick up the baton and continue whatever it is that they were striving for.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff in Göbekli Tepe that shows it's almost like a star map. It's like the way that a lot of the animals are depicted correlate with the constellations. It's very interesting. With the pyramid, everybody who goes there and who's blessed enough to go inside of it, they say that this was not made for human beings to be inside it. Um, and even now, what they did is inside the pyramid, they built stairs and handrails and stuff because it was so dangerous and hard to get around in there just as a human. And so even with that stuff, they're like, this is not meant for people to be in here. This has a function. This isn't just they didn't make all these weird chambers and aquifers underneath and all this different stuff for people to hang out in there or just to toss a dead body in there. Like everything that we believe about the pyramids and like mainstream Egyptology and all that is totally false. Like it just doesn't make sense. Um I believe there has to be some sort of function to that thing.
I agree. And I think there's some sort of function to most of the monolithic things that we see around the world that obviously took a lot of effort and a lot of time to create. it doesn't seem to me that you would spend that level of resources, that level of work to just create something, like you said, to throw a dead body in or to hang out in. I just don't think we have any conception of the true purpose of most of the monoliths that we find around the world. Serpent Mound being another interesting one that you brought up. It's so crazy cosmologically where the head is pointed. And it's interesting too, is that the cosmological aspects of a lot of these monoliths are sort of a depiction of history. And you can trace back in time, and it gives you sort of a inclination as to at least when it was built, and it gives you sort of an idea as to a method of communication of time, of maybe events that have happened in history that we need to be aware of. A lot of it seems to depict the potential for cataclysms to happen to us in the future that we need to really pay attention to. I think there's a lot of knowledge there.
Yeah, like, people speculate that Göbekli Tepe is well, it does point to the Taurid meteor stream, and some people would say that it's like a warning of the possibility of an impact, which the Taurid meteor stream, we were supposedly the one of the theories that we have that the last civilization that you would call like Atlantis around 12,000 years ago was wiped out by this meteor stream. And so that's one, it's like pointing at it. The like you said, the Serpent Mound, it's like eating the sun on the spring equinox. It's showing I like to look at it as like technology or a passing down of knowledge. Cause even with the pyramids, they say there's all sorts of weird shit encoded in there. And it aligns with Orion, where there's pyramids all over the earth that align with Orion, and they're in threes. They're the same way on different continents. I think on every continent, maybe not Antarctica, maybe if we just don't know about it, but every other continent has pyramids that align with Orion, and it just I think we have to give these people some credit and try to investigate. For me, what I'm interested in is investigating what they were doing, because I think it could have been something more powerful than we are aware of, that they had a mission to do something that we just can't quite grasp.
And I'm going to speculate that psychedelics played a role.
I would say it has to. And or other forms of altering consciousness as well.
Mhm.
There's like weird things you can do, like other technologies that help alter consciousness, sounds, different frequencies. I forget. I think there's a pyramid in, I believe it's in Mexico. I think it's somewhere in South America. But you may have seen this. It's like this beautiful pyramid. It's kind of boxy, but it's beautiful precision. It's just amazing. And when you're outside of it, you clap your hands. And the way that I don't know how it's done, the way that this thing is shaped, um, your clap will echo off of the pyramid, and it makes the sound of a bird chirping. You clap your hands and it chirp chirp, clap clap, chirp chirp. It
Whoa.
sounds crazy. Yeah, you got to look it up. Um, but there's a lot of weird things with sound. Even in the Great Pyramid of Giza, there's like it rumbles at like a certain frequency, and it'll hold it. Like if you're inside of it, it just like holds a specific frequency for a long period of time. Um, yeah, really weird stuff. And that's, I mean, one of the wild theories that people say with how they were built with is with some type of sonar sound tech where you can basically levitate boxes through certain types of sound, or boxes, whatever. Um, I don't know anything about that, but I have heard that.
Yeah, I've heard the same
Yeah.
thing.
Which it's like, for me, that's not totally, it's not out of the realm of possibility. I think that there are many avenues of technology that we haven't investigated because we've had success with one, and then we took it as far as we're going to take it. Well, it continues to move, but I believe that there has to be other avenues, like Carlson now talking about this plasma tech and a new form of energy that could be fueled by plasma. So I think any civilization, if you start them with one and they take it from there, it's like the butterfly effect. You have no idea how something could change dramatically from, just a different starting point.
And the hope is that a civilization like ours that has gone so far down the scientific materialist paradigm is able to survive long enough to not get smashed by another cataclysm from that torrid meteor stream. Maybe that's what they were trying to warn us against, you know? Fix your way, follow our breadcrumbs, and don't get smashed.
Have you seen that what NASA did? Supposedly they did that DART mission.
I have not.
This was a few months back where they sent a probe of some sort into space aimed at an asteroid to knock it off course.
Oh, I did hear about that.
So
Yeah.
they did successfully do that. But you know, if it's a bunch of asteroids, we're not going to be able to do that. So at least like we had some hope of trying to do something to avoid that. But I feel like what this line of humanity, what our culture is like moving toward is this AI thing. That's I think the peak of what's coming. Who knows what that will turn into. I think you know, they a lot of people say that these cataclysms happen like every 12,000 years or so, which we're getting there. And who knows, you know, Mount St. Helens or Yellowstone, whichever one it is, the super volcano, that's due. It's like overdue, I guess. So any day could be the day.
I do have high hopes for AI, though. I think it's going to eventually be something that helps to correct our path.
I hope so. I think that it's more about the people who are building it and what they want to use it for. So it's hard to say. I think it could end up in some pretty weird places where we are in the pod eating bugs.
I think it will get dark because the way that it's coming up into our society is through our power structures, and our power structures, as we know, do not have the best of intentions. So I do think we're going to experience some darkness, but overall, I think that if we don't demolish ourselves in some way, AI is going to be an important part of our growth.
And that's the sad thing about our nature as of now. It's like as soon as we create a breakthrough technology that has so many possibilities, first thing we do is weaponize it. We weaponize it and we craft it into some form of pornography. So it's like those are the two things that we immediately do with the highest technologies. So it's a matter of if we can get past the weaponization of AI.
It's very monkey like, you know, it's very primitive.
Yeah,
It's
just
what we do, though.
killing and fucking.
Yep.